Greetings, my dear students. Today we are going to start with a new chapter, that is food crops in India. After we have finished agriculture, we have seen different types of crops, the categories of crops. Today we'll be dealing only with the food crops. In the last class, I have explained you what is the meaning of the word food crops. Let us see what does the word food crops means and what are the crops that come under this category. So before that, we have to understand what are cereals. A cereal is any grass type of crop which is cultivated or grown for the edible components of its grain. So the grain which comes out of the cereal, that is edible, which we can eat. If you see this diagram, under the cereals we have different types of crops like wheat, barley, rye, rice, maize, oats, millets. And these are the products of the cereals, which what we consume every day. Now if you check under the cereals, rice, wheat and maize are the three major crops which cover 60% of the harvested land of the world. And these are the staple foods as they form the main diet of the Indians. And that is the reason these crops are referred as the food crops. So the first food crop what we are going to do is rice. What are the geographical conditions that are required for growing of rice? If you see, rice is a tropical crop, and from the temperature itself you can understand that it needs very hot climate, 22 degree to 32 degrees Celsius. During the sowing time, it requires 10 to 21 degree, and during the harvesting time, it requires 35 degrees Celsius. So it really needs very hot climate. Now, what about the rainfall? 150 to 300 centimeters. Now, this is only possible in the tropical region where we will receive heavy amount of rainfall, also high temperature. Now, what type of soil? As we know, rice requires a lot of water, so the soil also will be which can stagnate water for a longer period of time. So the rice grows best in alluvial soil, and that is the reason if you see the distribution, when we go to the distribution, you will see in the coastal areas along the northern plains, so where we find alluvial soil, so rice grows over there. What are the methods of rice cultivation? Now if you check, there are 5 methods of rice cultivation. If we start with the broadcasting, dibbling, drilling, transplantation and Japanese method. So these are the 5 methods and we'll be dealing with one by one. First of all, it is a broadcasting of the rice seeds. If you see that, farmer is throwing the rice, is scattering the rice seeds. And that is what is broadcasting. So it's a method of seeding that involves scattering of the seed either by hand or mechanically over a larger area. Now this is very quick and cheap method, and that is the reason most of the farmers try to utilize this method. It saves labor also, but the disadvantage of this broadcasting method is it does not grow uniformly, and germination of the seeds fail whenever the soil moisture is inadequate. So there are advantages also, disadvantages also. There's a lot of wastage of seeds in this also, because as we are throwing, some of the seeds will come together, they will not get enough water, they will not get enough sunlight, they will not germinate. So there's a lot of wastage of seeds in broadcasting method. Next method is dibbling. Now what is dibbling method? Now if you check these 2 pictures over here, The dibbling method, if you see, there is a rod with something underneath the rod. Now that is what we call it as a dibbler. That is an instrument. So it's a long bamboo pole with a metal scoop at one end, used to dig the soil in the furrow. The furrow is made and there's a metal scoop. The hole is dug and the soil is dropped, and then we cover it with the seed is dropped and then we cover it with the soil. Now this is time consuming, labor intensive and expensive method. One of the advantages, if we compare broadcasting with dibbling, one of the advantages is that as the seeds are put into the furrow, so there is equal spacing between the rows that is maintained. And that is a great advantage. There is less wastage of seeds. Most of the seeds germinate properly. So if we compare broadcasting with dibbling, that is how we compare it. The next method is drilling. Now if you see this diagram of drilling, it has a funnel with a plow. There is a sharp end through which we plow the field, and there is a funnel where the seeds are kept. So what happens as the plow is plowing the field, the seeds are dropped in the furrows at regular intervals from a small dispenser. That funnel is a dispenser attached to the plow. Now this method is very good but expensive, as it requires extra implements for sowing. One of the best methods of rice cultivation is transplantation. Now what is transplantation? If you see transplantation from the word itself, we can understand that it is something to transplant. That means to replant, to take a plant from one place to another. So let us see what is transplantation. Now seeds are raised in the nursery bed free from the weeds. There will be a nursery bed and the seedlings will be there. So the seeds will be raised. Now this nursery bed will be well drained and fertilized with low doses of nitrogen and phosphate fertilizers. After 15 to 21 days, when the seedlings are about 20 centimeters tall, they are carefully uprooted. Now just understand this part. Carefully uprooted means along with the roots. Okay, they are not just cut, they are uprooted properly. And this is what is transplantation. And again, they are planted in the flooded fields in rows 20 to 25 centimeters apart. Now it is a laborious task, obviously, because a lot of person or labor will be required to transplant. So if you see, there are 30 to 40 person per day to plant 1 hectare. Because we are taking the seedling from one field to another field, it takes longer time to mature. But one of the greatest advantage of transplantation is the yield increases by 20 to 40%. Now why the yield increases by 20 to 40%? Because we remove the weeds, we take proper care to plant it in a rows. There is always a gap between the rows so that proper weeding can be done. A lot of fertilization is required. So because of all this, the yield increases by 20 to 40%. Another importance of transplantation, it helps to conserve water resources through economical use. Another method is the Japanese method, and it is one of the widely accepted method of rice cultivation. Now, if you see this flowchart, how it is done, one of the important thing that is done in the Japanese method, it is very similar to transplantation, but one of the important thing is, in Japanese method we use high yielding variety of seeds, and that is Japonica. And that is the reason why the yield will be automatically more, and the rest part is same. Seeds are raised in the fertilized seed beds. After 15 to 21 days, it is again uprooted and planted in the flooded field. Now in the flooded field, the water should be 10 to 12 centimeters, standing water should be there. And just before the harvest, whatever extra water is there, it is drained off. Heavy manuring is done. Now that is what is Japanese method of cultivation. Beside this, what are the other points that you have to remember for rice? The different varieties of rice seeds. Now these are HYV stands for high yielding varieties. Taichung 1, we have seen already Japonica, Ratna, IL.8. Now these are the different HYV varieties of seeds. Now rice is, in some of the region, rice is harvested 3 times in a year. In the Kharif, it is called Aus. In the winter, it is called Aman. In the spring season, it is called Boro. Normally, it is done in West Bengal. We cultivate rice 3 times in a year: Aus, Aman, and Boro. Beside this, also, there are 2 types of rice grown in our country: wet and dry paddy. Now, if you see the difference between wet and dry paddy, it is very similar. Wet paddy is grown on a watered lowland plain. This is also known as the lowland rice, whereas dry paddy grows in the hilly areas. It is also called upland rice. In case of wet paddy, it is irrigation is practiced. Dry paddy, because it is grown in the hilly areas, facilities of irrigation is not there as much as in the plain, so it is primarily rain fed. Wet paddy, it is consumed in domestic market and sometimes it is exported also. Dry paddy, there is no surplus for export. They are consumed locally. So that is the difference between wet paddy and dry paddy. So we have seen two different types of rice: wet paddy and dry paddy. Don't get confused if sometimes it is asked in ICSE that what difference between lowland rice and upland rice? It is the same thing. Now, after we harvest the rice, we have to process the rice. Now, what are the steps of processing? Obviously, harvesting is one part, then threshing, winnowing, and milling. So, let us see one by one what is this. Harvesting, we know we have cut down the rice plants. Now, after we take the rice plants off the field, next step is threshing. So what is threshing? Threshing and winnowing. Now what is threshing? Threshing separates the grain from the stalks. It is done by beating the sheaves onto the block of wood. The grain gets collected in the tub. If you check, now this is how it is done. So that is a sheaf the women are holding is called the sheaf of rice, and they're beating it against a tub, it again a wooden bar. And why they do it? So that the grains which are there, it gets separated from the stalk. Now once it is done, then we have winnowing. So once we collect the grain, so what is winnowing? Winnowing is a process of removing unwanted particles from the rice grain. Now, how it is done? Now, rice grain will have a lot of unwanted particles, so we need only the rice grain. We don't need the other particles. So, how it is done? The grains are poured down from a height onto a mat. While it is falling from a height, the wind blows away the empty shafts and the husks. This picture will explain you. Here you see, it is from a height, the rice grains are allowed to fall down onto a mat. Now while it is falling, the lighter particles which are there, the wind will take the lighter particles away and they will put them out of the rice grain. So rice grains will be heavier, they will drop down, and the other things which is not required, which will be lighter, will be taken away by the wind. That is what is winnowing. So after we get the rice grain, now it goes to the mill. Now what is the work of a mill? It removes the yellowish husk from the grain. Milling can be done manually using a mortar or pestle. Now it preserves the nutrients. Or it goes to the mills where the grains passes through hullers and rollers. They're polished, so the yellowish part is removed, and the rice what we get in the market actually is the polished rice grain. Now, if we use the traditional things like mortar and pestle, it preserves the nutrients. And if we are taking to the mills where the machines are used, then what happens? It loses its vitamins, so the nutrient of the rice is lost. So that is a disadvantage of polishing the rice in the mills. For your better understanding, there is a YouTube link. You can go through the link. Now this is the milling that is done in small way. It is not in a bigger way. In a small rice mills, this is the machine that is used. Next, we move on to the distribution of rice. If you see the colored part, the largest producer of rice is West Bengal. Then we have Uttar Pradesh, Punjab, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, Bihar, Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, even in Assam. Now, if you see West Bengal, Bihar, UP all fall in the northern plains. If you see Orissa, some parts of Andhra Pradesh, if you see most of them lies on the coastal belt. So as I told you before, that rice needs alluvial soil. The best soil for rice is alluvial. So that indicates, so these are the areas where alluvial soil, we have alluvial soil. We have already done it in the chapter soil. So that is why rice grows mostly over here. Obviously, Tamil Nadu is also important. Now, Tamil Nadu is important because it receives winter rainfall also from the northeast monsoon winds, and that is where Tamil Nadu is a very important state for growing rice in the winter season. I have already spoken about West Bengal. It produces three types of rice, that is Aus, Aman and Boro. The next food crop that we'll be doing is wheat. If we talk about wheat, there are three different types of wheat. Bread wheat, that is the normal bread. Macaroni wheat, you see those pastas and all that you have. Emmer wheat, it is little brownish in color. So these are three different types of wheat. Geographical requirements for the growth of wheat. Temperature. Now, there's a huge contrast between rice and wheat. Rice is a kharif crop, wheat is a rabi crop, and you can see the temperature. Sowing time, it is 10 to 15 degrees Celsius. Harvesting 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. Remember one very important thing, dry, warm weather is essential before harvest for the grain to ripen properly. Rainfall, 50 to 100 centimeters. Now, Punjab, Haryana, these are the best places for wheat cultivation. Why? Because they receive winter rainfall from the western disturbances, which helps the seeds to germinate quickly. And that's why, after the introduction of Green Revolution, Punjab has become the granary of our country with the largest wheat production. And this western disturbance also helps in the growth of wheat in Punjab, Haryana, and UP. Soil, clay loam and moderate water holding capacity is ideal for wheat. Method of cultivation. The sowing of wheat normally commences from the end of October and continues up to end of November. The seeds are normally sown by drilling, we have already done in rice. Then dropping the seeds by hand, and dabbling and broadcasting. So we have already done all these things in rice, so I'm not going to explain it. It is the same thing. Other points to remember, one of the very important thing, grain ripens in March when the weather is sunny. Harvesting continues till mid-April. Now, one of the very important thing, during harvesting time, rainfall is very dangerous. It can cause disease and pests. Some of the common diseases that normally we get in the wheat are rust, smut, blight. So to see, that is a picture of rust. If you can see that red color on the stalk, that's a rust and smut. Wheat producing states, just now we have seen rice. Now if you see wheat, It is mostly concentrated Punjab, Haryana, Rajasthan, UP, some parts of Bihar, Madhya Pradesh. Okay, there are some parts, but the main producers are these Punjab, Haryana, UP. And as I told you, one of the advantage these states have is they receive winter rainfall from the western disturbances. The next crop that we are going to do is millets. Now, what are millets? These are coarse cereals which provide high nutritional values, that is, fats and proteins. The stalks are fed to the livestock. Millets comprise of three crops, that is, jowar, bajra, ragi. They are very hardy and they are drought resistant also. And because of this, they are also referred as dry crops. They can be grown in any type of soil, any climatic conditions. The requirement of water is very less, and that is the reason they are drought resistant, and that is they are also called the dry crops. So first of all, we'll start with jowar. This is how the jowar plants looks like. Now, jowar is cultivated both as kharif and rabi crops. What are the geographical requirements? Temperature 27 to 32 degrees Celsius. It cannot be cultivated, remember, below 16 degrees Celsius. Rainfall between 30 to 100 centimeter. Soil, it can be grown based on clay deep black soil but can survive also in dry sandy loam. So as I told you right now, these are the crops which needs very less amount of rainfall, high temperature, and it can be grown in any type of soil. Now if you check the major areas of jowar, and that is yellow in color, it is known as sorghum. You see the parts, that is some parts of northern parts of Karnataka, then your western part of Telangana, then you have Maharashtra. So these are more or less the areas where jowar is cultivated. Next millet, that is your bajra. Now this is how bajra looks like. Again, this crop is cultivated both as kharif and rabi crops. What are the geographical requirements or conditions? Temperature 25 to 30 degrees Celsius. Rainfall 50 to 100 centimeter. Soil poor, light, sandy soil, black, red, and even in saline soil. So any kind of soil it can be grown. Major crops, major areas, you will find bajra, that is some parts of Gujarat, Rajasthan, because they are very dry, it can be grown in any sort of soil. So very drier parts of our country, you can see bajra is grown. Next is ragi. This is your ragi plant. It is cultivated in the kharif season. If you see the geographical conditions, temperature 20 to 30 degrees Celsius, rainfall 50 to 100 centimeter, soil porous, well drained, loam to light red loam and sandy loams. It is normally found in Karnataka, which is the leading state, followed by Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. So after the millets, the next crop that what we'll be doing is pulses. Now pulses, if you see, these are different types comes under the pulses. Common bean, lentils, chickpea, all this comes under the pulses group. Pulses has a lot of importance. Now, one of the greatest importance of pulses is they provide protein to the vegetarians. Now, the vegetarians who don't have meat, egg, fish, this is one of the very important source of protein to the vegetarians. Another importance These pulses are the leguminous plants and are able to fix atmospheric nitrogen. Very, very important, and that is the reason they are cultivated as rotation crops with cereals to improve the soil fertility. If you remember in the last chapter, I told you how the rotation crops are used and how it enhances the soil fertility. For further information regarding how these crops fixes the nitrogen, you can go through the YouTube link that is provided. India is the largest producer and consumer of pulses. Now, pulses can be cultivated both in the Rabi as well as in the Kharif season. So, in Rabi season, we have lentils like masoor, rajma, chickpea, and in the Kharif, we have moong, urad. Now, these are the local names. Obviously, in India, we referred pulses as dal. So, moong dal, urad dal, rajma, masoor dal. So, these are cultivated as Rabi as also in the Kharif season. Now, what are the geographical conditions required? Temperature 20 to 25 degrees Celsius. Rainfall 50 to 75 centimeter. Soil alluvial, sandy, loam, black soil. Now, if you check the distribution of pulses in India, Madhya Pradesh is the largest producer with 18.6%, followed by Maharashtra, Rajasthan, UP. So these are the areas where pulses are cultivated. Now there is one pie chart to show the distribution of pulses. If you see Madhya Pradesh with 39% of the production coming from the state, with Maharashtra 14%, Rajasthan 14%, and there are other states, UP, Karnataka, and other states. So that is all about your food crops. I hope you like this session. Thank you and stay safe.